Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call this regular school board meeting of the San Felipe Duro CISD Board of Trustees this Monday, March 22nd, 2021 to order. This meeting will be conducted by video conference in accordance with the governor's authorization concerning suspension of certain open meeting law requirements for COVID-19 coronavirus disaster. Madam Secretary, would you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Contreras?
Not here.
Ms. Guanajuato Webb?
Present.
Ms. Haynes?
Not here.
Mr. Mesa?
Here.
Mr. Rufel?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Myself? Sir, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Let the records show that we do have a quorum of board members and that this meeting was duly called in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. At this time, we'll have opening ceremonies, first with a moment of silence for personal reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, thank you for being here with us today. We do have a different format, and it's starting to feel a little bit normal, so I'm glad we have the plexiglass still in social distancing and the requirements that satisfy our needs. But it is a much better, platform. First item that we have is going to be item 4, recognitions. Item A, San Felipe Duro CISD nursing staff, Sandra Hernandez.
Good evening, Mr. Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. It's great to see you here in person, and welcome back. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize our San Felipe Del Rio CISD school nurses. They have been instrumental in assisting our campuses to keep safe. They have also been instrumental in the process of the state rapid antigen testing and also in the vaccination of our community. And so they are one of our most valuable resources, and we know that they have been vital and instrumental. During these past few weeks, I want to particularly recognize that they have taken a step above and beyond their normal call of duty, and they have volunteered their own time to assist our entities, our Valverde Regional Medical Center, most recently here with our clinic, and in administering the vaccine. So they have given up their time. As a matter of fact, we had a few who worked just this past weekend during spring break. So I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize their efforts, and we salute them. They are wonderful healthcare professionals for their service to our students, for our staff, and certainly for our community. We are going to be recognizing them also. We have ordered a jacket for them, and unfortunately, those jackets are not completed by today so that we could have one to share with you to see, but we will be presenting them with the jacket for their time that they have given up, not only for our school district, but for the community, and particularly for the vaccination. So I'm going to introduce our staff that has worked along with us. Melissa Padilla Limon is our health services coordinator. And let me tell you, she hit the ground running. She is completely instrumental in being able to open the lines of communication with all of our entities and our school district. So she has kept us working and making sure that we were prepared in our teaching staff and our employees in the preparation for the COVID vaccine. Kiki Gladson is an RN at Del Rio High School, and she has also been instrumental in assisting Melissa, particularly with the rapid antigen testing at Del Rio High School for student athletes. Selena Mendoza is a nurse assistant at Gerardo Maldonado CTE Center. Alicia Carvajal is an RN at San Felipe Memorial Middle School. Alice Sanchez is an RN at Del Rio Middle School. And Dalia Galvan is an RN, actually she's an LVN at Del Rio Middle School. We also have Valerie Garcia and Selena Salas. Both of them are nurse assistants at Irene Cardwell Elementary. Raquel Frausto Torres is an RN at Dr. Lonnie Green Elementary. And Carmen Valenzuela is an LVN at Dr. Fermin Calderon Elementary in the Life Skills Unit. Wanda Rojo is an RN at Garfield Elementary. And our newly hired Veronica Gutierrez, she stepped up the first week when she came on board to help assist. She's an RN at Lamar Elementary. Jessica Wright is an RN at Ruben Chavita Elementary, and Priscilla Gomez is our nurse assistant at Roberto Bobby Barrera Elementary STEM Magnet School. So we wanted to take this opportunity today to thank our nurses for what they do and for certainly their help this year. They have been phenomenal, they have been instrumental, and they have been a very strong role model for our staff and our students. So I want to thank them for that.
Dr. Rios?
Mr. President, if I may, the clinics that are put on by the city and the county, they require a whole lot of volunteers, and a whole lot of community members volunteer week in and week out. The nurses had been volunteering week in and week out with just strict volunteer, no compensation at all, and we thank them for it. Now, I think that Ms. Garcia turned us on to a grant where moving forward, we will be able to pay them, but it's grant money dedicated for some events like this. So next month we will bring, or the next board meeting, we will bring to y'all a revised compensation plan so that we can provide some compensation for them for what they've done, because by the time we get everybody vaccinated in the community, it's just going to take a whole lot of time, and we worry that people are just going to tire of it because it's a week in, week out volunteer thing. So we hope to bring you that revised compensation plan so that moving forward we can provide some compensation to them, because it really has been a whole lot of time. They didn't volunteer once or twice. They volunteered just about every time there's been a clinic. So hats off to them, and special thanks to Melissa, who's been coordinating everything.
Wonderful.
It's been significant. And really, because of their volunteer, efforts, as well as other people in the district that have volunteered. It just establishes that spirit of cooperation. So the city and the county are just always keeping our teachers in mind when vaccines come available and making room for them. And later in the board meeting, Ms. Hernandez is going to make part of a presentation that just shows how many people in our school district have been vaccinated. So that's huge.
That's wonderful. I'm glad that we received some perks for them volunteering their time during Saturdays and Fridays as well. Sandra, did I miss, I know you have a life skills nurse at Fermin Calderon,
Yes.
but you listed 2 for Irene Cardwell. Is there one not going to the school itself instead of just life skills?
We have both young ladies at Cardwell that also stepped up to volunteer. And these are the young ladies.
But we used to have one nurse at life skills and then one at the regular campus.
Oh, because these are just the ones that volunteer.
These are just the ones that volunteered
Oh, those
for the vaccination clinics.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
Mr. Mesa?
Okay.
Mr. Mesa?
Yes.
If I
Ms.
may.
Webb?
I also want to thank all the nurses. I recently ran into Judge Owens, and on his behalf, I'm going to state that he was very appreciative of all of the nurses that have stepped up and volunteered and given up their time. But not just the nurses, all the other employees from the district. And also the principals that stepped up were also mentioned by Judge Owens. So to all of the district, our nurses, and everybody that has stepped up to help at the Civic Center and wherever they're needed, I really want to express our thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Anyone else? Again, we want to thank them again for providing that service for our community. And of course, we want to see as many people out there in the community vaccinated, because it serves the purpose of all being safe and bringing our students back at one point. I know that at a later point, there'll be students coming in for their vaccines. Projected time is somewhere in the summer. So we continue providing those services. And again, we thank each and every one of the volunteers that participated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Citizens to be heard. Do we have anyone that signed up? Anyone? Okay.
No, sir. We didn't have any.
All right, thank you. Well, then we go to our next item, reports. Discuss the survey results for the 2021-2022 San Felipe Duro CISD school calendar. Ade Garcia.
Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. Last month, we shared with you the process for the school calendar. And tonight, we're going to review the school calendar survey that was disseminated to all employees. This first slide indicates the common components in both calendars. The primary difference in the two calendars is in option 1, the second 6 weeks is 33 days, and in option 2 is 29 days. Friday, November the 5th is an RTI day in option 1, and on option 2, it's Monday, November the 1st. Third 6 weeks for option 1 is 24 days, and for the third 6 weeks on option 2 is 28 days. Last year, we had only 432 staff members who completed the survey, and we're proud to say that this year we have a total of 656 employees that responded to the survey. 312 employees, 48%, chose option 1, and 344 employees, 52%, chose option 2. That's professional staff, 443 employees voted. Option 1 was 188, and option 2 was 255. From our paraprofessional staff, 173 employees voted. 100 chose option 1 and 73 option 2. From our auxiliary staff, 40 employees voted, 24 chose option 1, and 16 chose option 2. We did also have an area for comments, and we had, from those 600 plus employees that voted, we had 44 comments. In your board packet, you find a list of all the comments that were included in the survey. And the most common ones were, the concern about starting so early, and then also that maybe we need to look into a 9-week grading period instead of 6 weeks. Any questions about the survey?
Questions, board members? Hearing none. I think the only thing is, you want to make sure that, whenever we do have a survey that involves all the employees, whether they're hourly, professional, paraprofessional, that there be ample time for them to take the survey and for it to be a valid survey, so we can have enough participation. But I'm glad that, it's pretty well indicated by 400 to, 100 and something.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item that we have is item B, under 8. This is HB3, our Early Childhood Literacy Progress Measure for first and second grade, TPRI, middle of the year, Ida Gomez.
Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. Part of House Bill 3 requires that monthly we do provide the board with an update on the goals that were adopted in January. In February, we did have the TextKia update for kinder, and tonight I'll be presenting an update on the first and second grade TPRI. The Texas Primary Reading Inventory is an instrument that's given to first, second, and third graders. It is administered 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end. The screening process includes a phonemic awareness, the graphophonemic knowledge, the word reading, and the accuracy for fluency and comprehension. You'll see here on the update that for first grade, the middle of the year summary included 701 students, of which 672 were tested. 29 were still not tested when we ran the report on March the 8th. Of that, we have 38 first grade teachers, and 27 teachers were able to complete 100% of their class assessments. In second grade, we have an enrollment of 746 students, of which 659 were tested. 87 are still pending their test. Out of the 42 second grade teachers, 18 have completed 100% of their student testing. The window does continue to be open, and we do continue to try and reach every student before the end of the year. The reporting for middle of the year, or for TPRI, I should say, it's a little bit different than the TextKia, but you'll see 2 comparisons on there. The top screen is the 2020 report. The bottom is the 2019 middle of the year report. In most areas, actually in all areas, we do see more students needing interventions this year as compared to last year. The interventions fall in the form of students are still developing. So once they're developed, they don't need the intervention, they're on grade level, but if they're still developing, they do need it. You will see that in several areas, it's a double intervention that's needed. In the blending word parts, the blending phonemes, the deleting initial sounds, the deleting final sounds, and the initial consonants, the final consonant, and the middle vowel are all more than doubled. For second grade, it's the same report, same components are assessed. In this area, you're not going to see the biggest or the doubled margins. However, you still see that in 2020, we have more students this year testing it still developed when compared to last year. There is a parent report that goes out to the parent. It does inform the parent that this is not a pass-fail. The Texas Primary Reading Inventory was created to help teachers figure out where a child might have a gap. It's not a pass-fail, it's a middle, beginning, and year. We run the report so that the teachers can then provide the interventions. We do have the intervention kits, we have had the training, and it's a progress, it just continues every day. Parents are informed of that as required by statute, and then they're also given the report as to whether their child is developed or still developing in any component. In working with the principals, we do ask what interventions are we providing that are specific to TPRI, to those components. And you'll see there that this semester, actually, we started something very different. The kinder, first, and second grade teachers are all teaching asynchronous as the plan that we submitted to TA. However, in the mornings, they are doing their teaching of asynchronous, and in the afternoon, they're having small group interventions where parents bring their students to school on a Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday for 1.5 to 2 hours. So we have started that, and in a later report, you'll actually see the numbers of the students who are coming in now for face-to-face interventions in an effort to close this gap. You'll see that they're using the TPRI intervention kits. They're tutoring in small groups. Just last week, they requested kidney tables with partitions so that they can start working closer and closer proximity to the students. Every teacher knows that the smaller the group, the closer you are, of course within social distancing, the better the attention that you're going to have from the student. That has been requested and is being implemented. We have, of course, focused remediation for all the still developing components. Our aides are helping out. We have picture cards, magnetic letters. We have the alphabet arches, all the different strategies that the teachers have been trained to use. Everything is tactile, and keeping the parents informed, I think, is the biggest strategy that we're using right now. That's the update on the first and second grade TPRI, and at this time, if there's any questions, I can try to answer them.
Questions, board members? Ms. Webb?
I thought with kinder, you presented the number of students that were on track, the number of students that needed support. With TPRI, the middle of the year, unless I'm reading this wrong, number of students, you have 670. And then under blending, you have 184. Is that 184 the students that are on track or the students that are not on track?
It will only be the students that are not on track is the only thing that'll come out on the report.
Okay, so we have,
if the child is still developing, in other words, then it picks it up on the report.
okay. So do we know if these students that are under blended word parts, blended phonemics, initial sounds, final sounds,
Yes, ma'am?
do we know if these students are the same students or are they different students? Because for blending, we have 184. For blending phonemics, we have 217. How many of these students are the same students that need work throughout their initial sounds, final sounds, blending words, and phonemics?
Yes, ma'am, that's a very good question. Lots of these students do fall in multiple categories. So the way the TPRI works, if you pass one category, you go to another category. So that would give you one component. But if you pass one barely, it lets you go to the next one. And if you barely pass that, it lets you go to the next one, but you're still developing.
Okay.
So I do not have that answer for you as far as specifics. Most of these students do fall in multiple categories.
Okay. Because that would be very interesting for us to find out so that we can be aware of how many students are actually not on level, how many of them are actually below grade level right now that we are already starting April, May.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, I mean, we only have 2 more months of school. So that I guess campuses can start making a plan as to what it is that they're going to be doing and working with these students so that they don't get promoted to the next level and they're already behind coming in. Because it's a big concern when we have multiple students not on track when we have 2 months of school.
Ms. Webb,
Yes, sir.
if I may, Mr. Mesa?
Yes, Dr. Rios?
The teachers that work with the students get the same report that the parents get. So they're aware of the multiple categories that the students need to be developing in. They have the information right at their fingertips. The principals who work with the teachers to set up the interventions, they're way ahead of us. They've had this information before we put this report, and they've already made plans for interventions. So the interventions that Ms. Gomez talked about earlier is based off of these reports. Now, as far as putting a report to the board to say how many kids have still developing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10 areas, we could put that together, but the people that are working with the kids, they've had this information well before we have and have already made plans. Now, if y'all want, it'll take us some time because it is labor intensive, but if y'all wanted to know just for the sake of data, we could put together a report. It would just take us a while.
I guess my concern would be, I'm not very keen on students falling through the cracks or students being behind at the end of the year and then get to the next level and they're already behind. I think you mentioned that out of the 42 second grade teachers, for example, 18 had completed their test, but we still needed some teachers. Hopefully they've completed all
Yeah,
testing. I don't know.
The problem with that, ma'am,
But,
are
yeah.
the kids that are not coming face to face,
Correct.
and so they're not coming into test. We had a lot of success with the kinder parents bringing in their students to test. Obviously, first, second grade, kids are older. Even 1 year kind of gets the parents to thinking that maybe they're more independent, and they haven't been coming in as we'd like for them to, but they keep working with them.
Okay. And I'm sorry I'm asking all these questions, but my concern is that if we have a strong foundation for these students, we won't have as many failure rates as we move up the grades. So it is vital for us to work with these students in kinder first, pre-kinder second, before they move on to third on up. Thank you, Ida. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. I know, I'll share this information that Commissioner of Education Mike Morath met with legislators this past week, and informed them that it would take 4 to 5 years, not 2 to 3 years, to bring these students back to the level that they should be. There's even talk about retention, which is something that I'm not too keen on, but this has not been your normal year for learning. He said the deficit was somewhere around 56% of instructional loss for the school year. So it's not your typical normal year, but there will be a lot of remediation that will be forthcoming in the summer months and for years to come, especially with our young ones. It's unfortunate that the ones that will be going off to college have lost valuable instruction that will be needed at that level. But we have time to work with the ones that will be here with us. And so we plan for the summer to have some additional instructional program pretty much year-round for the rest of the time.
Absolutely, and also, if I may, Mr. Mesa, we spent just a whole lot of time developing the summer program so that we could apply for that grant, 21st Century Grant. We won't hear about it until May. It is worth $1.7 million a year if we get it. If we don't get it, it's going to be difficult, but we're still committed to implementing as many of those programs as we can, because the remediation that the students will need moving forward, particularly the students in kinder through 5th grade, kinder through 6th grade, are going to be very extensive.
And I know what Mrs. Webb means, because the foundation for reading means a whole lot for all the other subjects as well. So, thank you very much. Anyone else? No one had a question? Okay. We'll move on to the next one, and it's item C, San Felipe Duro CISD Phased Transition Plan to In-Person Learning. Sandra Hernandez.
Okay, bear with me while I get the presentation up. Keeping in with the theme of the discussion of looking at our students having that COVID slide and having that instructional loss, we're looking to finish 2020-2021 strong. So in this light of this, I'm going to do some few slides just to kind of give you an idea as to where we're at. We're going to cover a few points. We're going to talk about the student and staff cases. I'm going to remove this for a moment. Student and staff COVID-19 case update. I'm going to share that with you. We're going to look at the immunization update as discussed earlier. A plan for increasing face-to-face instruction, and a focus on summer programming. So it certainly has been a challenging year and we know that. We know that it's been magnified to an extent that we had no idea. And of course, we had some weeks of severe winter weather that just kind of prolonged that. So we're hoping that this last grading cycle, we mentioned a couple of more months left of school, that we end strong, that we work with our students to end that school year on a strong note. So we have confidence that with the safety protocols that we have implemented so far, that we have seen our numbers of students who have contracted COVID-19 or have been exposed to COVID-19. And this graph shows you just after January how we started to decline. And we began back in January with 69 cases, then 82. It spiked up there for a bit. But we started to see a gradual decline. And by March the 5th, we were down to one student who was reported with COVID-19. We have a student enrollment of 9,813 students. Out of those students, we only had one report on March the 5th. But the week before we let out for spring break, remarkably, for the first time since this pandemic began, we had not one case reported of COVID-19 within our student group on any day of that week, nor did we have a report of students who have been exposed to COVID-19 that week. Only 18 students throughout the district were reported as having some illness, but there was no tie to COVID-19. Looking at our staff, and similarly, what we're starting to see, or we have seen, is over the past couple of weeks, we had no reports of employees with COVID-19. Our district has 1,422 employees. The staff cases have dropped to 0 for 2 consecutive weeks. We've begun implementing, as our state began to roll out the vaccine initiative. We surveyed our employees, 1,407 of them, and looked at the tiers for their eligibility for vaccinations. And at this point, we have had 907 employees vaccinated. What that totals to is 64% of our employees. This may be a reassuring sign that parents can send our kids back to school and end the school year strong. Breaking these numbers down, if we look at our elementary grades and our elementary staff, we have 283 teachers. 207 of these teachers have already received their vaccines. That equates to 73% of our elementary staff. Again, that is a very positive and strong sign. If we look at our secondary staff, we have 304 staff members. Of those, 193 have been vaccinated. And you'll see underneath the breakdown by campus. That equates to 63% of our secondary teachers who have been vaccinated. And again, I'd like to reiterate, this is a very reassuring sign. So we have a strategic plan. We spoke of increasing in-person learning, and we spoke of implementing, targeting specific tutoring for children who are in need. So,
Sandra, I'd like for Ida to present those next slides.
yes. Ida will be giving you some details of these plans, of these two next steps of the strategic plan.
So, as we started to discuss ending the year strong, we still have 10 weeks of instruction. That's a long time. That's over 6 weeks and a half. So we started thinking about what is it that we could do. And the first thing we wanted to do is reach out to parents. You saw the COVID decline, and reassure parents, bring in your students. Let us work with them face to face. Let us work in small groups. It could be fully from online to face for any kinder through 12th grade student, or in kinder first and second, it could be just in the afternoons, as we mentioned. And in a little bit, you'll start seeing the number of the projections where the principals and the campuses have reached out, the teachers have reached out to parents, and you'll see the commitment numbers of where we are today and where we project we will be in 6 weeks before any assessments. You'll also see the implementation target. Again, as I mentioned, small groups, very intimate. We need to reach the students one-to-one. They've been at home for many months, so having them come back where we have their attention is going to be crucial. On the next slide, and I'm not sure if there's a way to make this larger. I don't know. On the next slide, however, and you do have it in your packet, what we did is we put together our face-to-face student enrollment as of today. Next to it, we have our online student enrollment as of today. And then we have the projected face-to-face student enrollment for April 30th. That is the last week before any of the May STAR assessments and EOCs. You'll see elementary. We have 2,389 students, or 53% of our students today are working face-to-face. 2,082 elementary students, and that's pre-K through 5. 47% are online. Projected, principals calling, teachers calling, projected within the next 6 weeks, and it's a week at a time. We may have 20 coming next week and 30 the following, but between now and April 30th, we are projected to be at 63% of our students coming back for face-to-face. I'd like to point out, though, that the farthest column over on the right side for elementary, if you notice, We also have commitment from 146 kindergarten parents who are at home right now learning asynchronous to come in the afternoons on a Monday, Wednesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday afternoon for interventions. We have 140 first graders that have committed to coming in and bringing their children in for that intervention. And we have 128 second graders as of this time. If we move down to middle school, you'll see that we currently have 733 students, or 34% of our middle schoolers, learning face-to-face today. We have 1,410, or 66%, that are learning online, but the projected enrollment of 53% is 1,133 students. I'll explain the high school before I look at the notes. For our 9 through 12, we have 382 students who are learning face-to-face, only 13% of our population enrollment. Our online is 2,670, or 87%. We have a projected enrollment for April 30th of face-to-face of 1,283, or 42%. So the principals didn't just look at these and pick out of a hat. They started with failure reports, they started with students who have not been engaged, and they also looked at attendance. From there, those are the parents that they reached out to. There are a couple of things going on. Principals are utilizing the semester and the 6 weeks failure reports to bring in the students who are at risk of failing. These are students who are failing 3 or more subjects. Students projected to attend summer school due to failing grades and poor attendance are being encouraged to begin their face-to-face instruction today as part of their summer program. So if you reached out to me and I'm a parent, I might get the message that says, your child is at risk of failing. If you bring him in for the next 10 weeks, he can attend these 10 weeks plus June and possibly July and still have a chance of making his credits or being promoted. Because if somebody's been failing all year, it's going to be very difficult for them to come in just June and July. I think there's 17 days in June that are available and maybe 19 days in July. That's not a very long time to catch up. So if I look at the numbers, we have 400 elementary students who are at risk, high at risk of failing. We have 400 middle schoolers in 6th, 7th, and 8th that fit this criteria. But we have 900 9th through 12th graders who are at risk of not meeting their credits. So that's why the principals have done such an aggressive movement to try to reach those students to come in now for 10 weeks of instruction in addition to summer. So that's one of the plans of action that's taken a few weeks to get together. But as of today, we did see an increase in face-to-face enrollment, and we have the projections for the next 6 weeks.
Mr. President, before we move on, that first block on top of the kinder first and second for the interventions, that's based on that report that Ida just reviewed for us earlier, where the principals and the teachers have already looked and have reached out to parents. Now, unfortunately, some parents are saying, no way, no how, my child's coming in, and that's unfortunate. But for those parents that are willing to bring their kids, that's great, and we appreciate their cooperation, and we believe that those literacy camps, you explained, Mr. Mesa, in the last board meeting that there was a district in Houston that was doing it on Saturdays. Well, our version is to have it twice a week. It's probably going to be same duration, maybe a little bit longer, but in smaller groups, and we think that's going to be beneficial. So we're very appreciative. And for the rest of the grades, it's all about failures. We have double the amount of failures, and we're trying to reduce that so that it doesn't overwhelm us. But that is the reality of where we are right now. We had talked about setting some metrics and saying, you know, when the COVID numbers go down to this level, then we'll bring in more kids. And then when they go down to this level, we'll bring even more kids. But the reality is that right now we have 0 COVID cases amongst the students. The antigen tests that have been administered for our athletes for the last probably 3 weeks have all shown zero. It's really been 0, 0, 0 everywhere, which is an incredibly positive thing. So rather than just set those metrics, I think we're already there where we can handle it. We just need parents to bring their students in to avoid them failing, being retained for a year. So thank you for everybody who's been bringing them in, who's agreed to do it. For those kids that are being successful, we're not going to push them to come back. They're having success. We think the learning could still be improved if it was face-to-face, but at least they're passing. Right now, we want to focus on the students that need to be remediated because the number is twice as high as it was last year in pre-K all the way through 12th grade.
Great.
Yes, sir. And on the final slide, it's exactly that, Dr. Rios. Our struggling learners. At the end of the first semester, we had 17% of our elementary students who are failing courses. These were our online students, 17%, but when we compare that to last year, it was 13% of all students. So 17% of online versus 13% of all, 100%.
Can I ask one question right there?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, that's good. We're comparing to 2020, but what about 2018 and 2019? I mean, that'd be a more fair comparison to what a normal year would look like. Looking at 19 and 20 looks like, I'm just wondering if that 13% would be inflated on a normal year versus a normal year.
If I may, Mr. Smith, it would be a fair comparison when we look at the whole year, but this is looking just at the first semester. So last year, at the end of the first semester, COVID still hadn't hit. So it is comparing apples to apples.
Okay, maybe I missed that in here. I'm not seeing it, but that's fine. Okay, that helps. Yeah.
But I think that as we get closer to the end of the year, we would want to compare it to last year and even the year before that, just to get a good.
Thanks for the clarity. Yeah.
For our secondary campuses at the end of the first semester this year, 25% of our online students were failing 3 or more courses, as compared to 12% of all students this time the year before. We are having after-school tutorials, Saturday camps, small group interventions, bringing back students for face-to-face, those that are at home in kinder, first, and second. We have credit recovery. For the first time, we have credit recovery at the freshmen. We've never had to start it at the freshmen because the numbers weren't this large. So Mr. Cabello and his staff have started that program. We do pay teachers to handle and facilitate the program after school, but these students need to get a jump start. We've always had credit recovery at early college and high school, but not at the freshmen at this point. We have before and after school tutoring that's also available. And as I mentioned earlier, this will be the first time that we actually have a July summer school. It won't just be 17 days in June. We've always had that at high school, right? June and July. June is like the first semester to earn your credit, and July is the second semester. But elementary, kinder through actually 9th grade has only gone through June. This year, principals are looking at different options, working with different students. Not everybody will have to come in July. If they attend these 10 weeks and they engage and they do well, they may only have to come June. But if they don't come in now, it is going to be very difficult, just as all of you mentioned, to promote a student who only comes a few days in June and a few days in July. So that is something very new. We are looking for the funding. We are working with teachers and, principals who are working with teachers to try to extend our summer program. And that does conclude the presentation, unless anybody has any questions.
Questions, board members?
I've got a few.
Mr. Smith?
Few questions or comments, both combination. Looks like a really nice job on the vaccination rates and the faculty. So congratulations for that. And kind of directly related to that, you've got your highest percentage of elementary teachers, 73% of them has been vaccinated. But when I look at the expected increase in student turnout, and I try to do some comparison in the subgroups. In other words, you got elementary campus, you're only projecting really a 17% increase from where you're at today by the end of April. When you get in middle school, you got a 55% increase in expected turnout. When you get to high school, 200%, which, granted, there's a lot there with that population. But why so low an expectation where, when you look at this, where it's needed the most and you got the most vaccination, your expectation seems really, really low in relation to all those three elements, I guess is the point.
The focus right now is on the students that are failing, and that's
Fair enough,
who
yeah.
we're working with. Now, 1 or 2 weeks down the road, will we review it again? Absolutely. If we could get more students to come in, that would be great. But because every one of these students requires a face-to-face conversation or a real contact with the parents, it's proven a little difficult to locate them. But our initial goal was to have at least 75% of all students back. And that's what we're hoping for. But right now, with the targeted population, that's where we're at. But this is just the targeted population. Hopefully, we can move forward quicker and then start to just promote the success and have more kids come in who aren't necessarily failing. But we should be a lot better, I understand that.
And that 75% number you just stated, that's by the end of April, or?
That was our initial goal, 75% by the end of April.
Okay.
Didn't get the initial response we wanted, so then we started focusing on the failing kids. But that was our initial goal. Now we have to go, after we get after the kids that are failing and their parents and get as many of them back, then we have to just focus on everybody else who isn't necessarily failing. But the ones that aren't failing, they just don't see the need to come back. And because we have to offer the online instruction based on TA's regulations, I take it back, we don't have to offer it. Because we started offering it, we would have to, as the only ones that can decide to not offer it anymore is the Board of Trustees. And just say, we're not gonna offer it, and then everybody has to come back. I don't recommend that, just because we don't need that type of distraction going in. I think we need to focus on just encouraging students to come back, because schools are safe.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but at what point in time? Because I think what you're trying to do by capturing that end of April is capture that last 6 weeks.
Yes, sir.
And I think that 75% number, I like that number better than this, right? Which leaves some opportunity for fallout and the parents that just don't want to. But then there's a line drawn in the sand for the summer where we're coming back, unless there's some catastrophic failure in the whole system, that we'll go back to normal instruction during that time.
So the line in the sand is the summer. Summer school is all going to be offered face-to-face. The other line in the sand is this coming school year. We do not expect to have online classes as an option for everyone. We might have it as a limited option for a number of students. We have to see what TA addresses with that, because it is based on funding. But it would be, if we did go down that road, it would be based on excellent current attendance, excellent grades, excellent state assessments. It's not going to be, it's not a school of choice. You have to meet all these requirements to go there, and it would be very limited.
Okay.
But as far as for the general student population, the first line in the sand is summer school, then the ultimate one is the start of the 2021-2022 school year.
All right, so the point that I guess that close this out on my end is, I think overall, I think probably this, for me, it's understated. I like your 75% number. That seems to be a viable goal where this seems a little bit too weak, right? And that said, so that's really nice, and I know the students and the teachers and everything will start feeling good about that. Then as we get into these next 8 weeks, what does that end of the world for the seniors start to look like, and can we get some normalcy built back into that deal with proms and those kind of things? I know y'all are probably having those conversations. I'm just throwing it out there just to make sure that we are.
Absolutely. The high school is currently entertaining the idea of having 2 proms, one on Friday and one on Saturday, to get everybody in. We're looking at the numbers to possibly have just one, and can we have like a group dance in the gym, another group in the upper level, another group in the lower level. But if that's not possible, at a minimum, we'll have 2. We're also hosting the district UIL competition here in town. So we're doing as much as we can. The capacity at the events, we're trying to double that. So for example, baseball, we're gonna go from, instead of being 6 feet apart, being 3 feet apart. It's out in the open. Parents have been expressing concern about not being able to see. So we are doing a whole lot of things to move in that direction. Unfortunately, our 75% target, that's entirely based on parent cooperation and parents, either because their students are being successful online or because they just don't want to come. It's a little bit difficult, but that's still our goal, our ultimate goal.
Yeah, and maybe there's ways to motivate that. Maybe, I'm not sure, but some creative ways. But anyway, good job and congratulations. That's all I've got on that subject.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else? Ms. Webb?
How many seniors do we have that are at risk of not graduating? Do we have any idea? More or less?
I can probably get to that number first thing in the morning when I ask Dr. Pettis, because they have all of that, and they've been addressing the students for credit recovery already.
Okay.
So I can get to that number first thing in the
No,
morning.
I was just wondering, based on, are they gonna come back? I mean, if they're at risk of not graduating, that should be an incentive in itself for them to figure out, what do I have to do? And then, I think on the 73% page, you have you have Calderon mentioned twice, Sandra. So I think one of them might be Cardwell, if I'm not mistaken.
So I put that data together. Let me look at it, and I can pick out my mistake real quick. I can tell you by the percentage. The 91% is Calderon at the top. The 64% is Cardwell.
Okay.
No, sorry.
Yeah, because it's Dr. Fermin Calderon, and then you have Calderon again.
Yeah, that's Cardwell. I'm sorry,
Okay.
ma'am.
Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Mr. Orfeld?
Yes. For my own curiosity, as we try and bring them back on to campus in the remaining, what's remaining in the school year, and can you go back to the page that has the percentage
Yes, sir.
goal? And so, 63% capacity, I guess, at elementary overall, 53 and 42. With hoping to bring that many in, do we, one, have enough teachers, if we get to that number, do we have enough on site to be able to do it? And then two, if we do we have enough we have enough room to comply with, I guess, the most recent CDC guidelines now, which are saying, within the classroom 3 feet apart. But I guess the thing is, if this number comes in, do we have enough teachers on campus that will be able to meet the 3 feet without overcrowding the classroom. And if not, are we going to have to pull more teachers from online and tell them you're coming in face-to-face, which means stacking another online teacher with even more students, because I've personally gone through that already this year with my child. So, I guess that's the first question. Do we have the ability to do that? Manpower.
And there's probably a whole lot of answers to that, because it is an awesome question. The first thing is, yes, principals have already been transitioning teachers from online to face-to-face to comply with the social distancing. So there's already been schedule changes. And we have had parents ask, why is my child changing teachers? Well, because your teacher is now going to be a face-to-face teacher. In some cases, the parents have said, oh, well, then I want my kid coming back face-to-face because I want that teacher. And I know that there was a case for sure at Lonnie Green where 100% of the kids came back online because they didn't want to not have that teacher. So that is happening already across the district for the last 2 weeks. Another thing that has happened across the district is, we went through this first phase where we were building a whole lot of dividers for kids to sit behind their little cubicles, and then we got a lot of them built. Well, now as more kids are transitioning back, our maintenance department is back at it building more dividers to keep the kids as far apart as they can. The third thing that's happening is that in some cases, if Mr. Mess is the teacher and I'm an instructional aide, his kids are split up in 2 classes. So he goes and he does the direct teach to that group, and then the aide watches them while they do some practice, and then he'll teach this group. So we're doing that to make sure that there's enough space between students. And then probably the final thing is that we do have some teachers on AWA, alternate work arrangements, where they are working from home. And Ms. Garcia has been working with the principals, so as the need arises, the teachers are asked to come back and terminate their AWA where necessary. So those are at least 5 things, Mr. Overfelt, that are being done to maintain safe distances and not overcrowd anyone.
Okay. And I guess the last thing that I'll add is, as even though we're seeing vaccine numbers tick up in the sense of people being vaccinated, we also need to be very cognizant of the fact that there's going to be a very large percentage of our students' parents who are not vaccinated. And I know there's going to be a fear amongst the teachers and staff of the students bringing it on campus, and then they get or possibly exposed. But also, I think it's important that we should communicate to our staff who have been vaccinated that, okay, you're fully vaccinated. It doesn't mean like it was 18 months ago, and we still need to be careful, especially in the environment that we're in. So I think that probably needs to be communicated to help alleviate and reassure some parents who are going to be sending their students back.
Absolutely. Mr. President, we can just remind the public that our safety precautions don't go away just because we have just because we have 0 cases or because we have a large amount of employees vaccinated. We still have to wear a mask. There still has to be the whole protocols as you arrive at school, the questions that you need to answer, the restroom protocols, the lunch protocols, all of those protocols have to remain in place. And even next year when we go to face-to-face, 100%, a lot of those protocols are still going to be in place. So I'm not saying that just because we're not going to have online learning next year doesn't mean we're not going to have masks and that we're not going to have all these other protocols in place. We're going to study the situation as we move forward, but I just expect that some of those protocols even next year would still be in place.
Good deal.
Thank you, Mr. Overfelt. Anyone else? I'll add my questions, I guess clarification. When we mean vaccinated, could you break that down from first vaccine to second vaccine if there's two vaccines, completed?
No, sir, I'm sorry. The survey that we did with the teachers only asks for the first, I say teachers, but with all our staff, only asks if they had the first dose. The assumption is that they're gonna go for their second dose. I know that Saturday is the second dose vaccine, and so a lot of our employees will be there, but this strictly only.
Right, okay. Well, maybe for the next report, because my other question has to do with the stimulus money coming to the schools, and my biggest concern is air filtration, like at Del Rio High School and Del Rio Middle School, where you have windows and confined areas with, again, no means of opening windows or going outside. So, what will be utilized to have a filtration system in those schools?
Mr. Mesa, by August, when the students return 100%, our hopes are to have an improved filtration system at the high school, at the middle school, and our hope is that by this coming Friday, we're able to provide the board an update of what that cost will be. So I think we're very close to it, Mr. Henge, and probably by this weekend, we'll be able to provide an update of the cost, and by the next week, a funding source and plans to have that implemented before August.
Okay, great. And I know that I've heard some really great systems that are not expensive, they're very inexpensive, that can be utilized to filtrate the air, especially in closed campuses. Okay, thank you very much for that report. Appreciate it. Next item that we have is item 8D, Term 4, Attendance and Discipline Reporting. Michelle Smith.
Mr. Mesa, do you all want to go through the report, or do you have questions?
The biggest satisfaction that I have is we're in a whole harmless year that I worried about, funding with the poor attendance that we have. When Cardwell was number one, and has always been at the very bottom, and Cardwell was at the very top last reporting period. So I'm glad that it's not going to affect our funding. Unless anyone has a question, I don't think we need to. We've seen the numbers and we're okay, as long as we get our monies. Thank you very much. Next item is the consent agenda. Again, one action will approve all items on the consent agenda. There are some minutes of some meetings, the February 22nd and March 4th. There are financial statements, there's donations, and there's purchases. If there's any item that needs to be pulled out or you have a question on, now would be the time.
Mr. Mesa?
Yes, Mrs. Webb,
Yeah, I would like to pull out F2
F2
and G3 for discussion.
and G3.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you like more information, or would you like for those to be separated from the rest of the consent? Do you have questions, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do you want to ask those questions now?
Okay.
F2.
Okay, F2. We have on F2 some equipment or cafeteria equipment or equipment replacement at North Heights. And my question is, how was that campus determined as needing the equipment in comparison to the other campuses? And do we have a list of the other campuses that need equipment renovated, etc.?
Dr. Rios?
So this equipment is being purchased through a grant.
Correct.
Okay. This is a grant that our food service department applies for. And there's some requirements on the grant. The first thing is that you have to qualify for it. The second part is that you can't buy equipment for a campus through this grant more than once. So on the sheet that we have here, that our food service department prepared, you can see that when we started with SFE is when we saw the more aggressive applications for the grant. The very first year, they got equipment for Blended and Irene Cardwell. And of course, they could only spend as much money on that campus as they qualified for. So they purchased for Blended and Irene Cardwell. So we can no longer purchase equipment for Blended and Irene Cardwell until we fund all the other campuses that qualify for it. The next year they did Calderon, Garfield, and Lamar. The next year Chavira and San Felipe, then Buena Vista and Del Rio Middle School, and now this year it'll be Lonnie Green and North Heights. But that's how it's selected. You can only fund one, so every campus is taking their turn based on what our food service department deems their needs to be, because it's a grant. Now, the last time we purchased equipment, we did a district-wide study, and I believe that, Mr. Henge, I don't know if you'll recall the numbers, but we spent probably close to $250,000 twice on purchases, but this one is just on grant money, and it's determined based on the cycle that food service sets with the parameters of the Department of Agriculture for Texas. So that's how that determination is made, ma'am. Why they went in that order, I'm sure it was based on the needs and the money that was available for that time, for this grant.
Okay, then we need a correction on number 2 because it only states North Heights. On the form that you just gave us, you have Lonnie Green at North Heights.
I think there was a previous grant where Lonnie Green was already purchased for in the past or will be purchased in the future, but today's approval is only for North Heights.
Okay.
G3?
Okay, on G3, question on the demographic services. Was there not a study done prior to the new elementary school being passed on the bond? Was there not a study done to determine what the needs were of the community as far as growth? And if there was one done, when was it done?
It was done right before the bond election in preparation for that. And then it continued to determine what we would do with Cardwell.
So we already had a study done to determine growth, et cetera. So why do we need another study done? And what was the cost to have that one done last year before the bond, or was it at the same amount, $22,000?
All of our studies are right at the $20,000 range, ma'am. So the scope of the studies is different. So the first study that we engaged in, and it's not the first study, ma'am. I mean, the last study was one to determine where the appropriate location of the new elementary school would be. And then it was to determine, I guess the secondary purpose of it was to determine where, what we would do with Cardwell. You know, was there enough room to absorb the students and close down a campus? At that time, the determination was that there was. You know, that we could either go to one of the campuses, and there was a whole lot of discussion about that. This specific study moving forward, and I'm sorry, and at the time, I shared it with the board that there would be another demographic study to actually draw the actual boundaries where students would go, where students would attend. So if you consider, let's just say that by the time this demographic study is done, based on where we're at, Buena Vista, and then the new elementary school being built in Ceniza Hills, there has to be a specific line drawn to say, if you live at 209 Echo Valley, you're going to Buena Vista. But if you live at 301 Echo Valley, you're going to the elementary school at Ceniza Hills. So this one's actually going to draw the actual boundaries. You know, then what are we going to do with the kids at Cienegas? Are they going to go, you know, to one school or the other one? And the other piece of that demographic study is to present that demographic study to the Citizens Committee that I hope that we're able to meet in April, and have a final recommendation to the board as to what the board should consider doing about Cardwell. You know, are we going to build a school on site, or are we going to build, or are we going to close down one of the other elementary campuses, which at this time it appears that if that was the case, it would be North Heights. But again, the demographic study would inform the Citizens Committee, but that really is secondary. We have to draw the lines to plan for the future elementary schools. I shouldn't say it's secondary, I think it's all intertwined. It's all part of the same need.
I guess my question stemmed from if we had a study done prior and and spend, like you said, over 20,000 a year ago, and now we're doing it again to determine the cutoff.
That one didn't determine the cutoffs. That was just studying growth and what we could do about Cardwell. This one's going to be specific boundaries to start planning for that time.
Okay, those were my only two questions. I don't have any other questions.
Anyone else? I think the only thing, Dr. Rios, on that one, what threw me off was Zonda. We had never done business, and it's previously Templeton.
It's still the same company, sir. Templeton sold to Zonda, but it's still the same principal operator, and they're still the ones doing the work. So it's still the same group. Thanks for that question.
Yes. Yeah, and I just want to state again, for donations, we're always grateful for individuals and organizations donating to our school district and our needs. Thank you again for the donations, and for the sake of time, we will not read those donations, but they will be posted on our website. No other questions? Then I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion made by Mr. Smith. Is there a second by Mr. Orfeld? All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. We go on to administration. This is item 10 on your agenda. First item that we have is item 10A, consideration to approve an amendment to the superintendent's evaluation calendar. Sandra Hernandez.
Yes, sir, thank you. Good evening once again. In accordance with the Commissioner's rules, when we're looking at Chapter 19, Section 150.1031, each district must establish an annual calendar for the appraisal process of the superintendent. The amended calendar includes a modified timeline of activities that will reflect the change to the superintendent's evaluation, the date of the evaluation, and the start dates for the budget workshops. And we made some changes for the budget workshops. They will start earlier. You'll see those changes reflected in the amended calendar. And that calendar is included in your packet.
That's on page 128 in your packet. Anyone have a question? It's just the month change from,
Yes, sir, just changing the months,
May 10th.
readjusting the months.
there being no questions, the recommendation, please.
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the recommended changes and amendment to the 2020-2021 Superintendent's Evaluation Calendar as presented.
Thank you very much. You've heard the recommendation from administration. I'll entertain a motion for approval made by Mr. Smith. Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Orfeld. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 10B, consideration to approve a resolution to support funding for a pedestrian bridge over Highway 90 East and the Union Pacific Railway. Sandra Hernandez.
Thank you, sir. This board resolution is in support of funding of a pedestrian bridge over U.S. Highway 90 East and the Union Pacific Railway. During the course of the school year, heavy traffic could occur continuously on Highway 90 East as a result of students who are attending Del Rio Middle School and Dr. Fermin Elementary. Additionally, many student pedestrians living within walking distance from these particular schools cross the Union Pacific Railroad tracks and back when they're going to school and home. This resolution is in support of funding for pedestrian bridge and also to authorize the superintendent to submit a letter of support to the Texas Department of Transportation and Union Pacific Railroad. I do want to make a note that the City Council for the City of Del Rio has passed a similar resolution in support of this project.
Questions, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I'd like to understand more about it, but I mean, we're not really approving the project, just to start the discussion, right? And I don't know where, I mean, I kind of got a generic idea, but it makes sense to me.
There's two things going on. The first one is where TxDOT would fund the construction of the bridge.
Okay.
We're just, as a school district, saying, yeah, it's a great idea because it would prevent kids from jumping over the railroad tracks on foot, trying to cross Highway 90 on foot, or having to walk all the way to the McDonald's across. So we're just passing a resolution saying, yeah, absolutely, go for it.
So it's just, we're hands off. We just say we support the idea, and that's.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But there is a second part to it.
Okay.
That already came up, and unfortunately we haven't come to an agreement. TxDOT is already doing a whole lot of sidewalk work east and west of the property that we own. Mm-hmm. And they told the city, hey, so we're not doing this part here, but if y'all want to do it, then you pay for the material and we'll do the work. So the city reached out to the school district and they said, well, since it's for the kids there, would y'all be interested in participating with us in that? And I said, absolutely, because our kids walk through there. So I asked our director of construction, or construction manager, Mr. Chapa, to visit with the city and understand where the sidewalks were going to be laid. But unfortunately, where they're proposing to put the sidewalks, our kids don't walk through there. Now, if they built this bridge in the future, well, then our kids would walk through there. But right now they don't, so then I couldn't see myself asking the board to fund $100,000 to build sidewalks where our kids aren't crossing. So that's the piece that we would have participated in funding, but because we couldn't reach an agreement as to, hey, revise the plan and you know, I'll ask our board to fund it, we didn't go there. If they built this bridge, then absolutely, because then our kids would use those sidewalks they're recommending, but not right now.
So just from a curiosity standpoint, you're talking about that bridge would kind of connect that road that goes in on the east side of the campus to the traffic light there. The bridge would kind of connect into that.
It's a pedestrian bridge.
Yep.
So it would probably be somewhere in the middle of between those two
roadways.
Roadways, yes.
And then the sidewalk would be down the front of the highway frontage, or feeding into
Calderon and Del Rio Middle School.
Okay.
On the side, right now the students, unfortunately, walk on the west side, mm-hmm. and they wanted to build a sidewalk on the east side.
Right.
Nobody walks on the east side.
Yeah. Good. Okay, good.
But right now it is hands off. It's just expressing our support.
Very good. Thanks for the clarity.
Any other, Mrs. Webb?
I have something very similar to Mr. Smith, because in the petition, it says to petition for a safe access for students to cross, but it doesn't say to whom. I know it's TxDOT and Union Pacific, but it's not stating in here to whom it's going. And then you mentioned part of the funding, so when we look at the last statement, it says in support of funding for a, instead of just funding a pedestrian bridge. But I understand that we're supporting the funding in the hopes that TxDOT and Union Pacific fund the project?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but it's not stated on here that we are.
they sent that resolution to us. That's, I believe, the same one
That the
city
city
adopted.
approved.
It's their project, we're supporting them. So unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, we didn't write the resolution.
Because I think that the city adopted something that stated, the intention of the letter is to make Texas Department of Transportation and Union Pacific come to an agreement to fund a pedestrian bridge over 90 East and Union Pacific Railway. So I don't know if ours is gonna go in addition to the cities, or ours is gonna go separate to Union Pacific and TxDOT, or how is that working?
I would clarify it in the letter, ma'am. So I'll definitely look at it closer, make sure that the letter that we send exactly clarifies the intent of the resolution.
Yeah, because, I mean, the way I read it was that we were in support of funding the bridge, the walk bridge, and like Mr. Smith mentioned, I don't know exactly where it would be, across the highway and across the railroad track, but to me it stated that we were funding it.
No, we're not. So
Thank you.
I'll clarify that in the letter.
No, I do want to clarify, the reason why there has to be a letter to Union Pacific Railroad is because it would be crossing the railroad tracks. So we would have to write to not only the Texas Department of Transportation, but also
Also,
Union
the
Pacific.
Union Pacific, yes, ma'am.
Anyone else with a question? Okay, recommendation, please.
It is the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the enclosed board resolution in support of funding of a pedestrian bridge over US Highway 90 East and the Union Pacific Railway, and authorizing the superintendent to submit a letter of support to the Texas Department of Transportation and Union Pacific Railroad.
Thank you very much. You've heard the recommendation. The motion is made by Mr. Smith. Is there a second to the motion, Mrs. Webb? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries unanimously. And I'll remind board members to make sure you stay after the meeting so that we can sign the resolution. That way they won't have to send someone to hunt you down to get that resolution signed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Item 14, Human Resources. Consideration to approve the 2021-2022 school year calendar. Aida Garcia.
Good evening again. Earlier, we reviewed the survey for the 2021-2022 calendar, and now we would like to make the recommendation. It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve option 2 for the 2021-2022 school year calendar as presented.
Questions from board members? I think we've asked all the questions over here. No questions? Mr. Orfeld?
Just a comment, sir.
Okay, Mr. Orfeld?
In reading through the comments and talking earlier about summer school program, the fact that we're going to go into July this year, I completely understand some of the comments that are in there about starting early and emphasize words escaping my mind. But I completely understand where staff is coming from about empathize. There it goes. I completely empathize with the staff about summer being shortened. I understand that. I know it's been a difficult year with everything that we've been through, and everyone is looking forward to this summer and some semblance of normalcy. So do know that we hear you on that. It's just, this is how it, unfortunately, we're gonna have to go this year with the new one and with what they've selected. But we do, I do, and I'm sure my other board member colleagues do, completely understand the summer part of it. And that doesn't go unheard.
Thank you, Mr. Orfeld. Being no other questions, you read the recommendation. Mr. Smith made the motion. Mr. Orfeld made the second. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
So option 2 is our school calendar for next year. Next item we have student services. Item 15, A, consideration to approve the submission of an application to the Texas Education Agency, TA, for a missed school days waiver. Ms. Cheryl Smith.
Good evening, Mr. Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the board. On Friday, February 12th, 2021, Governor Abbott declared a state of disaster in all 254 counties due to the predicted severe winter weather, which posed an imminent threat of widespread and severe property damage, injury, and loss of life due to prolonged freezing temperatures, heavy snow, and freezing rains statewide. On Sunday, February 14th, 2021, the city of Del Rio suffered widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life or property, which resulted from the winter storm. This winter storm included ice, freezing temperatures, and extreme wind chills. As a result of the winter storm event, City of Del Rio Mayor Bruno Lozano declared a local state of disaster for a period of not more than 7 days from the date of the declaration. On Monday, February 15th, 2021 through Friday, February 19th, 2021, San Felipe Del Rio CISD experienced substantial electrical and water outages, as well as damage to some of the campuses as a result of the winter storm. These outages resulted in complete district closure for the entire week. On Wednesday, February 17th, 2021, TEA communicated via the TEA Superintendent Listserv the following message. If your LEA continues to experience electrical outages and its related impacts, districts may request missed school day waivers for the remainder of this week, in addition to the previously communicated maximum of 3 days without makeup days required or having to utilize bad weather days. Administration is requesting permission to apply for the district-wide missed school days waivers. The missed school days waivers would encompass the following dates: the week of February 15th through February 19th. Are there any questions?
Question from board members? Seeing that there's no questions, the recommendation, please.
Okay, there is a correction to the recommendation. The recommendation should read as follows. It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the submission of the application to TEA for the district-wide missed school days waivers.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Smith, seconded by Mrs. Webb. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, the time is 7:32. Pursuant to Section 551.074 and 551.071, we're going into closed session. Again, we will reconvene in open session. The time, again, is 7:33 p.m. We're now in closed session. Okay. The time is 8:27 p.m. We're reconvening into open session. No action was taken in executive session. We're down to item 18 on our agenda. 18A, consideration to approve the personnel report to include the following: new hires, district vacancies, retirements, resignations. Aide Garcia.
Good evening again. It is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the resignations and vacancy listing as discussed in closed session.
With the recommendation, is there a motion for approval? Motion made by Mrs. Webb. Is there a second to the motion? Motion made by Mr. Smith. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Item 18B. Consideration to approve the administrator and professional contracts.
Yes.
Aide Garcia.
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the 75 administrator and professional contracts as discussed in closed session.
Read the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Motion made by Mrs. Webb, seconded by Mr. Overfeld. All those in agreement, please raise your hand. Okay, motion is approved unanimously. Item C, consideration to approve the teacher retire-rehire contracts. Aide Garcia.
It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the 298 teacher and retiree rehire contracts as discussed in closed session.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion for approval? Motion made by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mrs. Webb. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Item D, consideration to approve the position of Transportation Director for District Transportation Department. Idea Garcia.
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve Mr. Thomas Cabello for Transportation Director at the Transportation Department.
Heard the recommendation, motion for approval. Motion made by Mr. This is Mrs. Webb, seconded by Mr. Smith. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item E, consideration to approve the position of librarian for Del Rio High School. Idea Garcia.
It is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve Ms. Jacqueline Gurley as librarian for Del Rio High School.
Thank you very much. You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Smith, seconded by Mrs. Webb. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item F is tabled. There is no item F. It is tabled for tonight. There being no other items on the agenda, is there a motion for adjournment? Motion made by Mrs. Webb, seconded by Mr. Overfelt. All those in favor? Thank you very much. We are adjourned. It's 8:30 p.m. Thank you.